So, as Evan said, I am Koop. I am a core developer. I work on JavaScript. I love it. You all should too. You can find me on the internet, shockingly. So, this is what we're going to talk about. First of all, can everyone kind of at least read this screen a little bit because it's small? Yeah. All right. Can everyone hear me? There will be times where I'll be looking at my computer and I will be quiet. In that case, you can yell at me, or if you were here last time, as Chris Coyer did, you can make a mountain. This is supposed to be up or something, but just tell me to be louder. I will try my best to be loud. First thing I'm going to do is do a recap of 3.5. Then we'll talk about some new libraries, Underscore, Backbone. We'll talk about media. And then we'll have more, well, no more pizza, and maybe some cold beer by that time. Because there are a lot of you here, which is awesome, and I'm really happy to see that. Come to more meetups. They're going to be awesome. So WordPress 3.5. As Evan said, we did a bunch of stuff there in media. We're going to talk about that last. So fresh. We have new buttons, new UI stuff, a new color picker, which is really pretty and is much better than Farbtastic. If you ever used one of the old color pickers, you'll know what I mean. The new buttons just make things look a little bit nicer, a little more like it wasn't built 8 years ago. And so that's nice. You can use them in your designs, etc. The links manager is gone for new installs. For old installs, if you used it before, it's still enabled, it's fine. And if you want to add it back, there's a plugin in the plugins directory by other core developer and my close friend Andrew Nason. So check that out, something restore links manager. Don't worry, we're not going to delete all your links. But it's blog rolls. Like, I mean, how many of you use blog rolls? Let's just see. Show a hand. No one. OK. So we have less options. We went on a spree of just removing stuff from the admin. Just little options that don't make sense, like enabling XML RPC should probably happen because you want to use the mobile apps. And don't worry, we've left a filter to turn it off. Same thing goes for the privacy page. We've reworded it and improved the UI and merged it into the general page. One less settings page. Great. And a whole bunch of other settings that just didn't really make sense or were a little complicated, we've moved to the code side. So that's great. Trying to make things a little simpler, a little less confusing, because we definitely have enough settings pages and enough settings. So we also gave some love to accessibility. We now have skip links, so you can skip straight to the content or straight to the menu by tabbing. The customizer got some accessibility love. The admin menu got accessibility love. Just everything is a little bit better with the keyboard shortcuts, with the labels. And so, yeah, awesome. Hopefully that will help people. Next, we added some new Embed stuff this release. We added Instagram, SlideShare, and SoundCloud. So if you use any of those services, if you just paste a link on an empty line in the editor, it will automatically embed. This is one of my favorite features, and if you guys don't know about Embed, it's pretty much like magic, where everyone comes up to me and it's like, oh my god, I need to install a YouTube plugin. And I'm like, no, you don't. And so all you need to do is grab a link to a YouTube video, put it on its own line, and it'll just work. And when you hit publish, it'll appear in the post. We're actually thinking of doing some cool things with that in the next few releases to make it show maybe in the post. Shh. But moving forward, in this release, we also focus on developers. Developers, yeah, OK. For developers, WordPress now plays nice with PHP 5.4. It doesn't throw notices, which is great because notices suck. We have a new WP post class. It doesn't have so much fanciness yet, but it is really nice for passing things around in the admin. So we actually are using the global post variable much less. Now we're really just using get post and doing an arrow to ID. We're leveraging our PHP 5.2 minimum requirement, and we're leveraging this new WP post class. Pretty awesome. I suggest you look at it. For those of you who are doing meta queries, they're more robust, they're better, they're more well tested. Check it out. It's awesome. For those of you who use multi-site, switch to blog is a thing that we can tell you to use now. Oh, woo, yes. I thought you said my name. OK. So yeah, switch to blog used to be kind of like a lot of dragons and scary and blow up your server. Now it's not. So you can use it, and you can easily switch around your multi-site and kind of, if you're doing maybe a home page that pulls content from a bunch of different sites in the network, you can now just switch to those individual sites using switch to blog without, setting your server on fire. Next is multi-site in a subdirectory and multi-site performance. Multi-site in a subdirectory is very thanks to Evan right there. So for you clapping, that's him. That's pretty awesome. So you have subdomain, subdirectory, multi-site's getting better. Awesome. And the XML RPC API's got a bit of love. So if you're doing mobile apps, if you're integrating other services or endpoints, you now can do more stuff better, which, on the code side is pretty good. Also, we might have done some stuff with media. And namely, we have the new UI for uploading, which I have been focusing on. We have real attachment pages. So if you used to go to the media section of your admin and try and edit a thing, it used to be 4 lines that said title, description, alt text, and caption, which is basically 4 ways to describe your post without telling you what any of them do. Now it's a real post type page, which is actually really cool because it means that you can just add 1 line of code to say turn on tags or categories for your media files. So that's an awesome benefit. And lastly, we have compatibility with ImageMagick, which means higher quality, better images if your server supports it. So we have this layer that supports both GD and ImageMagick. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's OK. If you do, you're probably excited. OK. Let's take a look. So this is WordPress 3.5. We have a fancy updated welcome screen where you can just do a bunch of stuff, little icons. Where else can we go? Let's take a look at the library. If I want to edit one of these, I can open it up, and it's a real attachment page. We can even edit the image in here. Sorry, I will talk louder. You can edit the caption. You can edit the alt text. You can even edit the content with quick tags. Which is cool. And what else? Let's go down here. You look, there is no privacy page. And there are a bunch of settings that don't exist. We still have a lot of them. It makes me sad. What else is there? Well, let's check out the new color picker. So in the customizer, we have colors. That would be where they are. And if we want to change the background color, we have this awesome new color picker, which is fancy. And you can click to get a head start and just see as your theme changes. Also, one of the things I forgot to mention is that we have 2012, which, if you've checked out, it's already been released. It's available for 3.4. But at the same time, it is going to be included in this release, which is pretty sweet. So let's take a look at this. This is 2012. I don't have any posts on this install because I deleted them all. But this is what it looks like, and it's very pretty. Yeah, so check that out. What else? Let's take a look at the post editor. Meetup. SF Meetup. Hello, SF Meetup. So take a look. TinyMCE has just a much nicer bar, so we don't have all of this UI Chrome and buttons all over the place. We have just this sleek bar, very handy. Just lots of little things that make it a bit prettier. And lastly, we have the old media, which I'm not going to open up, and new media, which hopefully isn't broken. We open it up, and we see this screen where you can drag and drop files, or you can select them. They will upload right there. Let's select a file. Let's select this Dirty Projectors show. And it will upload right there. You can edit it, etc. Fancy. Let's publish this. If we go to the library, you see your library in beautiful infinite scroll. And you can select a bunch of images. See, it's being slow because it's doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. Great. We've selected stuff. We can either insert all of them, or we can create a new gallery, where then we can describe all these things. So we can say, Hanny likes chocolate. And that will be saving to the server, amongst other things. Where are we? We're here.
No one can see what you're typing, just so you know.
It's OK. They don't need to see what I'm typing. We can type captions. We can change the gallery settings, and then we can insert it into the post. It's really not pretty right now because we're looking at making it better, but that's not in this release. And then when you have it again, when you have a gallery in your post, you can edit it and drag and drop to reorder. Yeah. And on top of that, we now also support multiple galleries in a post. So we are de-emphasizing the connection between having to attach an attachment to a post and this weird post-parent thing where only one media item can be attached to only one post, which is confusing and weird. Now what it is we still record that. So if you have any scripts that use it or any custom themes that leverage that, don't worry, they'll work. But we're recontextualizing it as this attachment, this media file, was uploaded to this post, which makes more sense because you can only upload it to one thing, but you can use it all over the place. So galleries, we can have multiple in a post now, which is great because they're explicit. You choose the images you want, like these. Then we can create a new gallery. We can sort again because apparently that's amazing. And then we can insert it. And there are two of them. And you can edit both of them. And it will work. Amazing. What's it look like on the other side? Let's take a look at our post now. So this is, let's actually add a couple breakers first. My first gallery and my second gallery. Give that an update. We'll refresh. We have the gallery. We have all the descriptions if you added them, and then your second one. And so that's going to be really nice for telling short stories in a post if you want to just throw a couple images in there. If you have a theme that overloads it and does a custom slideshow, all of this has become a bit easier now that we support multiple galleries. And so that's pretty rad. Also, if you look on the text side, you can see that we're just specifying manually the order of IDs, so it respects that. If you're a developer, that's how you interact with this, is the IDs property. Shannon, did you raise your hand?
I did. So I noticed the little X's on the individual pictures. Is that for removing from the gallery?
That is for removing from the gallery. It's so good of you to notice. If you want to edit this and you want to remove an image, you can say, like, maybe this shouldn't be in here. Great. I removed it. I can update it. Life's good.
That's a really good thing.
Yeah. So it's all of these simple things where you look at it and you're like, that makes sense. And sometimes you look at it and you say, that doesn't make sense, and that's because of old stuff. But it's way better than, wow, what is this? How does it work? There was a question here and then a question there.
Can you reuse galleries?
So you cannot reuse galleries. The question was, can you reuse galleries? My answer is no, you cannot. It is sad but true. The way that galleries work right now is that they are a part of your post, and representing them as their own object type was something we talked about, but would have required a lot more effort, both on the kind of server databasey side and also in just way blowing up the scope for this release. So maybe that's a direction that we'll go in eventually. I personally would really love to see someone enhance this kind of stuff and build a full-blown media management plugin, like something like iPhoto or Aperture or Lightroom for WordPress, because you can totally do it. And I would be pumped to see that happen. There was a question right around here, and that one back there.
So on the front end, looking at it, what happens when you click on it?
So the question is, what happens when you click on a gallery image on the front end? And that actually is something that you define in the modal. So you hit Edit, and you have gallery settings up here, and it tells you where they link to. So you can either have them link to an attachment page or a media file right now. So right now they're linking to the attachment page. So when I go over here and I open up this picture, say, it'll open up this page where you have the caption down here, you have a longer description if you want to fill it in, and the title is up here. You also can link straight to the file, so it's really your choice. And for all of that, a theme can override that stuff so that it can just display a gallery, or like Jetpack has the WordPress.com carousel in it, where you open it up and there's a carousel view instead. There's all of these different ways that you can manipulate your gallery on the front end. It's really just up to your theme. You back there first?
Yes. Do you have the ability to change the thumbnail size in the UI without typing into the shortcode?
So the question is, do you have the ability to change the thumbnail size in the UI without typing in the shortcode? Right now, that answer is no. Part of that is that we give you control for columns, as we have in the past, and as much as I dislike forcing theme options upon people, and I feel like this is something that themes should take over more, we have to do this for the way things work, and having both columns and size means that you can't respect both, right? Because the theme automatically sizes the images in the columns to work. So if I want to make these, say, bigger, I edit my gallery, and I can switch it to 2 columns or 1 column, update the gallery, refresh the page. These aren't bigger, apparently. It's a bug.
You can control it in other ways.
But yeah, this makes me sad. I know that if you do one column, it'll work. It should, because we fixed it. We should have fixed it. Let's try it. See if we fixed it. No! All right, I get to talk to someone about that. Fun.
Can you share images across multiple sites and multi-site?
The question is, can you share images across multiple sites in multi-site? And hypothetically, yes. By default, no. The UI doesn't really, like, if you could, it's a very specific use case, right? Because multi-site can be used for just a small personal network where you do want to see other people's sites. It can be used for a huge network like WordPress.com or anything in between. And at the same time, then it's whose sites do you have access to? How do you control that access? All of that stuff would probably be best handled in a plugin and on an individual basis. And so it's possible, yes. It's not there by default. You had a question.
Has there been any change to the way that you can edit images, individual images, like cropping and stuff like that?
The question is, has there been any change into the way you edit images? And the answer is, sadly, not. Hopefully in the future we will get to take a look at image editing and how to do all that different stuff. Behind the scenes, ImageMagick does make things a lot nicer, improves quality. We've also worked to improve the speed of crunching by a little bit. But in terms of the raw image editing UI, that's been left the same.
Is there a preferred plugin that you'd suggest that would work really nicely with this?
The question is there a preferred plugin that would work nicely? And my answer is no. Yeah.
When you upload an image to create a gallery like this, and you get to type in the description and title and so on, and then you want to use that image in a gallery in a post that you're creating, it's going to, the attachment page is going to have that information that you typed in. Later on, if you go into the media library and you edit that description, does that retroactively apply to all of the attachment pages where that image is used in galleries and posts?
So the question was, how is the data on a given attachment treated on attachment pages? And to answer your question, I will answer it in 2 parts. One is if you've inserted an attachment into the post, it becomes HTML, and so that data is now specific to the post. So if you insert an attachment and it has a caption, you can now edit that caption in the post. However, if you have an attachment in a gallery, or you're editing an attachment in the media library down here, that is saved to the database. Attachment pages are coming from the database, and so when you update one, you're updating the attachment page. There's only one attachment page per attachment, so when you update the attachment's data, the attachment page updates. I am going to move on, and if you have any other questions about 3.5, about how media works, about WordPress at all, anything, just ask me afterwards. So let's talk about JavaScript. So we did a workshop before this, and we covered a bunch of stuff, intro to JavaScript, differences from PHP. For those of you who were not at the workshop, or even no, for anyone who's in this crowd, who here feels comfortable reading JavaScript? Not just writing jQuery, but reading JavaScript code. OK. That's about a lot of middling hands. I think like everyone's hand was halfway up. So we're just going to go through. JavaScript's a lot like PHP. And really, the differences are mostly around how objects are handled, how inheritance is handled, and how functions are handled. And so these things should be somewhat familiar. If there's something that's really confusing, you can shout something out. But I'm going to move quickly, and we'll see where we end up. So in this release, we've added 2 new libraries in addition to jQuery, and we also use a few others like TinyMC and PLUpload. But libraries for developers, we have jQuery, and now we have Underscore and Backbone.js. Underscore and Backbone.js both work together. So first, I will tell you a little bit about Underscore. Underscore is a utilities library. So if any of you have ever used Ruby or Python or any of these more functional languages, we have a lot of list helpers, a lot of object helpers, a lot of things that let you just manipulate data. A lot of these things actually are in newer versions of JavaScript. And so what Underscore does is it delegates to, if the browser supports the newer version, it uses that, but it provides polyfills for the older things. So you can say, we can manipulate lots of lists really easily. It has really, really good documentation. So I'm actually just going to teach you about that by showing you the docs. Can you all kind of read this? Is this somewhat readable? In the back-ish? Not really? One more? All right. It'll be kind of hard to, maybe I can hide this. Anyway, we'll take a look at the functions on the side for a sec. It has a lot of helpers. So we have collections. We have things like each, map, and reduce, which are your more traditional things. You have filter. You can say see if everything returns true, see if only one thing returns true. You can sort things, group things, turn them into arrays, shuffle them around. Those are all things like that. We can manipulate arrays really easily. So you can grab the first item, the last item. You can flatten a whole bunch of nested arrays. You can say, give me an array without these few items. You can take intersections and differences. You can just manipulate things really well. And so these are patterns that we write in our code very frequently, just over and over again. It's boilerplate, right? You're saying, all right, I have this array of stuff, and I want to remove these few items. All right, I'm going to have to write a for loop and iterate over the array. If I find the right stuff, I add it. If I don't, I don't. And that's a couple lines of code. And what this does is it just provides a pattern so that you can just do that. And that is incredibly handy. And it just saves your time. It's good. I guarantee you, if you're looking at it, this will change the way you write your JavaScript, and definitely for the better. It's really exciting. It makes scripting really fun. So we can keep going. There are also functions. Functions for dealing with functions. So the bind method that we talked about in the workshop, where you want to lock a function's context or run partial application on a function, supported in newer versions of JavaScript, but not older, that's available to you. Bind all is pretty awesome. It lets you say, take this object and lock the context for these methods. Memoize is like an auto-caching thing. Delay is delay this code for however much time. You can throttle functions automatically. You can debounce functions. So throttling is, I pass it a function, and I say, run this function only once every 200 milliseconds. So something like the scroll handler, where every single pixel you scroll, it's going to fire an event. And so there can be thousands of events when someone just scrolls the page. We can run throttle, and it will only fire the event, say, once every 200 milliseconds. Or we can pass the function through debounce, which says, only fire when this event has not happened for 100 milliseconds. So if you've been scrolling, it's not firing, it's not firing. As soon as you've stopped scrolling for 100 milliseconds, then the event fires. So these are two patterns that we actually use a bunch in core to make sure we don't burn your browser to the ground. And it's really handy to be able to just wrap these in small functions. Also, you can get the keys of an object, the values of an object. You can push them together. Extend. If you use the jQuery extend function, Underscore has one of these as well. Defaults. If any of you use WP parse args, this is very similar, which says we have an object, and we want to make sure that these values are populated by default. If it has this key, don't do anything. If it doesn't, give it the default. We have a bunch of checks. So equality for arrays and objects, where they're not totally equal, but you want to check if they have the same values. That works. You have a bunch of handlers like empty, element, arguments, function, all of these nice little things. And then you have a few utilities like the ability to generate a unique ID based on a string, the ability to escape text to be put in HTML, and the ability to create templates. So that's pretty much Underscore. It lets you do all of these things in both a functional and object-oriented syntax. The object-oriented stuff is to deal with chaining, and we will take a look at that in a second. So let's actually, I wonder if I can just hide this. And whoa, that's no good. Let's give that 20 pixels. All right. Much better. So Underscore also has all of this awesome documentation. So if you wonder how any of these functions work, you can just scroll down the page and they give you little examples for every single one, right? So for each, it's simple. We give it an array of 1, 2, 3, and then we pass it a function where it just alerts that number for every number, right? Or you pass it an object, and you get the key and the number. It does the same thing. Mapping is transforming one array into another array. So you can pass it an array or an array of objects. You can do the same thing, just return it. I'm not going to go through all of these because there's a whole bunch. Find is like find the first item that matches in the list. So this one's saying if the number is a multiple of 2, find the first one. So gives you the first one. You can filter items. So you say, well, find all numbers that are multiples of 2. Returns you those. Where is actually an awesome one, where it says, here's an object, give me back only the matching objects that have these properties. So in this case, you say, find me all the plays that have the author of Shakespeare that were written in 1611. I can go on and on and on and on. Invoke is pretty cool, which is just call this method on every element passed in. This is really, really handy when we're dealing with lists of different objects, lists of instances of objects. Same with pluck, which we have in WordPress as well as WP list pluck. You give it a list of items. You say, I want all of these properties, but ignore everything else. Scrolling. Flatten the arrays, arrays without these objects. Join all of these arrays, intersect all of these arrays, take the difference of all of these arrays. And I said a lot of this stuff. Bind works, bind all works. Any questions about Underscore? Does that give you a good picture on what it does? I see nods. That's good. Underscore makes programming fun. That's the short thing. It cuts down on the boilerplate you have to write. I recommend using it. You'll enjoy it a lot. So Underscore is the first library. The second library is Backbone. Backbone is a small library that runs on top of Underscore and is built to give your applications a little bit of structure. So whereas you'll probably use Underscore all the time if you're dealing with lists of things in JavaScript. You'll use Backbone when you're trying to really build an application or something interactive. When you need to add structure to something and really separate your data from your UI, that's when you're going to be using Backbone. So media was a great example for something like this, where we have all this data and all these different things, and we need to be able to have multiple instances of the same thing flying around in different panels and different views, and everything needs to stay in sync. And so this was the solution that we ended up going with that kind of helps all of this stay in check. So Backbone has a bunch of different components. I'm really going to focus on about 4. The first one is events. So it's the simplest Backbone component, and it's actually present on every other one. Events has 3 methods you should care about. It's a mix-in, so you can just apply it to an object. You generally don't just create an object of events. It's usually part of something else. But if I'm writing custom code, I will often use events and extend a prototype with that, and then all of a sudden my object has a very simple events implementation. Events has 3 methods that you care about: on, off, and trigger. They're very similar to jQuery's methods. You can separate multiple events with a space, and that's it. You can provide callbacks. In this case, we're saying, all right, a speaker is just this empty object. It's now an events object. We say, on the hello event, log hello world. And then we say trigger hello, and it will say hello world. What's also worth knowing, and what we'll take a look at in a second, is that there is an optional 3rd argument to on and off, which is the context that you're going to use. Right? So we spent a whole bunch of time earlier, for those of you who were here, talking about the this keyword. On and off let you specify what the this keyword of your callback should be. And very often you're going to want it to be the object you're in. So in this case, I might want it to be speaker. And then I can say speaker has a name. By the way, it's fun to have a code editor in your slides. So say the speaker has a name, my name, Koop, and then I want to also log the name. I could type speaker.name because I have a reference. But if I wanted to use this in this circumstance, I can pass speaker in as the final argument to on, and then I can change that to this. So it's simple, but you'll end up using it a lot. The other cool thing is that with off, you can call off without all of the matching arguments. So if I did want to turn this off and make it not work, I could do a whole bunch of stuff. I could say speaker dot, by the way, can people read this? OK. I could say something speaker.off, and I could be really specific, like hello. This is an anonymous function, so I actually don't have a reference to this. I am unbinding all events that are hello. But if I just want to unbind all events that are hello and have speaker as the context, I can pass in speaker. Or if I just want to unbind all events that I have speaker set as the context, I can just pass null as the first 2 arguments. And this is really, really handy when you're building larger applications because it lets you do intelligent unbinding, which prevents memory leaks. Right? You're going to want to be able to clean up after yourself, remove the right DOM nodes, and also clear off a bunch of events if you're building this highly dynamic application, right? Where you're not refreshing the page very much, and you're working in one single page load, which allows memory to build up, so you can't rely on the browser just clearing the slate all the time. Memory leaks become much, much more apparent when you're dealing with a dynamic application, and so you have to watch this stuff. But when you remember to unbind your events and clean up after yourself in terms of DOM nodes, just by removing things when you don't need them anymore, that's pretty much the recipe that you need to keep your application in check. And if you take away 2 things about memory management for a large application, clean up your DOM nodes, and clean up your events. That's it. Clean up after yourself. Moving on, because that was a distraction. Backbone has models. Models are basically events plus observable attributes. which is pretty simple. It also has a bunch of RESTful state and saving and syncing and stuff like that, and we're not going to talk too much about that. The basics of models are just you have a bunch of observable properties, and then you have a bunch of events on those properties. So I can create a new model with a few properties. In this case, the name we were talking about before. And then if I want to log the name, I say speaker.get name, and that's the variable, right? Now you're saying, well, speaker.name would be so much simpler. Why aren't you doing that? And the answer is that you can watch name for changes. So every time the name value changes, a Backbone model will fire off two events. It will fire off a change event, which is generic and fires off on any attribute change, and it will fire off on change, attribute name. So it will say change, name, and that's the event that will fire. So if we take a look at this here, we can see that it's the same model, and we say, all right, when the speaker's name changes, log, now my name is blah. And so if I set the name to Daryl, it will say, now my name is Daryl. And it's both, conveniently, but whatever. And so you can see how powerful this starts to get. Observable values are awesome and really allow you to build intelligent UI or only update certain sections of the UI when something changes. So for example, we have a search field, right? And we want that to stay in sync. And we have a group of attachments, and we have a search property on that. And we say, whenever the search property updates, update the search field. Whenever the search field updates, update the property on attachments. And then that does everything else and updates the rest of the UI automatically, which is fun. So continuing onwards, Backbone has collections. Collections are just a group of models. By default, it uses a Backbone model, just this simple model, and you can create them by just passing this in. It has add, remove, all this other stuff, and also I think something around 30 methods from Underscore that can act on the array of items in the collection. So in this case, I create a collection of people with homes, and they're different neighborhoods in San Francisco. And then if I want to get all the people who live in Soma, I can say people.where home is Soma, right? And I can do this on a normal array, but remember, these are Backbone models. So the other cool thing is that collections have events too. And collections receive every event that happens on one of their models. So anytime someone moves in my collection, I can say people on, whenever someone moves, whenever home changes, log name moved to value, which is passed in automatically. So in that case, if I say down here, so people first is Anna, and I can say set home, and maybe she moved to Hayes. The people collection will know, and the people collection will say, Anna moved to Hayes. And so it's really nice to be able to watch groups of things. So on a more practical scale, when we're in media, we have a single attachment model, and then we have groups of attachments that represent queries or galleries or what you have selected. All of these things are a set of this one model. Lastly, we have views. Views are the visual representation of these models and collections. A view can be a representation of a model, it can be a representation of a collection, it can be a representation of neither of those things. It can be whatever you want. But what's really cool about a view is it's really just a set of conventions. So it creates a single element by default that by default is a div. And you can give it a class if you want. Home. And so when you have this view, you can create instances of it. You can pass it things like models. And so in this case, we have a render function that when you call it, it will apply these changes from the model onto this element. It will just say, so-and-so lives in whatever their home place is, right? We're using also a toJSON function on the model's properties, which makes it pretty easy to just use these properties as an object when you're manipulating them. Very often we'll use templating in here. We'll get to there in a little bit. Also, when you're writing a render method, always return this out of convention. It's just handy. So watching an application of this view, I can take the same speaker that we were talking about before, Dave, who lives in the mission, and I can say, all right, here's a new view where the model is Dave, and we're going to render it, and then we're going to append it to the body, and then all of a sudden we're going to have in the body of our document, it's going to say, Dave lives in the mission, right? And this is a kind of simple and contrived example, but you can build these things up to be incredibly powerful. And what's important to recognize is that a view only really cares about its contents, right? So it only has an element, and you actually can pass in, by default, some events. So it will automatically do event delegation. So I can say events. Let's get rid of this for now. And then I can add a function that will automatically be bound and unbound as these events. And the cool thing is that if I had more structure in here, I could pass in a jQuery selector, something like class of like hometown, and it will, anytime someone clicks hometown, that will happen. It automatically deals with this delegation, which is really cool. And then you can just run whatever happens on click here. And that also handles with binding and unbinding and all this fun stuff. So views are pretty powerful, even though they're pretty simple. And what it lets us do is kind of represent discrete small parts of our application and string them together to form something larger. So when you talk about something like media, we have a big outer view and then subviews and subviews and subviews and all the way down into like a little attachment where that's a view and the search box is a view and all these things where we say, all right, I want to just have this little pocket of functionality. Great. Now it's reusable. Now we can just move it wherever we want. It's also been really nice because this has helped us iterate a lot, where we've gone through probably 4 or 5 major UX versions of media throughout this release and just trying to get it right. And this has allowed us to pivot in only a day or so per change, where you're just like, we're going to change the fundamentals of how this works. All right, just move this piece here, this piece there, this piece there. All of a sudden it works again. And so that's really cool to do. But again, this is kind of something that you can take advantage of in a larger application. If you're just building a simple theme and want to slide something down, maybe Backbone isn't for you. Underscore might be for you, but Backbone might be overkill there. Yeah, and so now this Backbone, to talk a little more about that and then go to media. Backbone also has awesome documentation. It's a little more complex, so I'm not going to go over all of the examples. It also has really great annotated source code, both Backbone and Underscore. I'm working to get Core actually compatible with this as well. And it looks kind of like this. It might be hard to see, but it just takes your inline comments and displays them right next to the code that's doing it. So it just is a little nicer than reading the file. And it also helps you stay honest with your commenting and be like, oh, I haven't commented this part of the code. I probably should. So if you want to know how either of these things works, it's reading the source is not as scary as it normally might be, right? And so you can scroll down. You have all of these. Here are the events we were talking about, et cetera, et cetera. And in Backbone, similar docs to Underscore. You just have this sidebar of stuff. It also has a router for controlling where your URLs are. So if you want to use push state or hash bangs, that's for you. It has a sync method. So if you have a RESTful service you want to sync with, and you want to have your models directly in sync with that with something like Ruby on Rails, that'll work pretty much out of the box. If you want to work with WordPress, you're going to have to send some things to AJAX handlers, send a little actions through. We have a couple of abstractions in Core to deal with that for media, but that's that. And then where is that? So views can use templates, and I said I was going to talk about those briefly. Templates are awesome. It's basically a bunch of content where you just inject some variables in, and it will output some HTML. So if I search for that here, Underscore has easy templating built in. There are tons of different templating libraries rather, and Backbone does not bind you to a specific one. You, by default, will probably use Underscore templates. In Core, we use a slightly modified version because if your PHP install has ASP tags turned on, it will break for standard Underscore templates because they are ERB style, which is sad. But to look at a standard Underscore template, it looks like this. You pass it just a string or maybe the contents of a script tag, and then it will output. You pass it a variable with maybe a name property like we were talking about, and in this case it will say hello name as the output. And so it lets you kind of separate your chunks of HTML where, I don't know how much JavaScript you guys have written, but if any of you have had the experience of writing just a ton of HTML and like concatenating all these strings and juggling them and being like, oh, if this happens, then add this string, and if not, munge these together, and it's all nested and it looks kind of nasty and it's not syntax highlighted, don't do that anymore. Use some templates. They're fun. They'll make your life easier. You'll get excited. These are things like making JavaScript more fun, right? Templates are one of those things. We're using them for media. We're using kind of a mustache-inspired syntax. I will show you an example in a few minutes, and that is good. You can also compile your templates in advance if you're not doing weird things in your server-side language. I'd recommend that. Yada, yada. Talk to me after if you want to do that. Where are we? So yeah, that's Backbone for the most part. And all of that powers this. That is what's happening behind the scenes. And what's cool about it is that every single piece of this is exposed. So if you want to override a certain really specific behavior of media, you can. And if you want to create your own tab, you can. If you want to create an alternate version where we worked on separating workflows so we can choose a featured image, that's not going to show you the embed from URL tab, and it's going to work in a very specific way. You can only select one image at a time. I want that. That's my featured image now, right? And this is integrated for custom headers and backgrounds as well. And you can write integrations for your own stuff too. It will work very well in the admin. Right now, use on the front end is a bit experimental, but hopefully we can get that shored up for 3.6. So they're really powerful. We have two main files that this is working with. In WP includes JS. You have media models.js and media views.js. Media models is something that you're going to want to use if, say, you're just dealing with the UI on your own. If you're doing completely custom UI, you probably don't care about our views and their abstractions. Just include the models. The models are probably the easiest place to get started too because they're the base of everything like we were just talking about. So there are two really important types of models and a few extra types that we use in the views to just make things smoothed out. So for media, we have, I'm going to increase the font on this a little bit. Can people see this decently well? We have an attachment model, which you can just grab an ID and get it from the server, and it's shared with everything. So if you call something like WP media attachment get and pass in an ID, that will return to you an attachment model. If it's already gotten it, it will return to you the same model, so it makes sure that these things stay in sync, which is awesome. And if you want to get its data, then you'll take that variable and call the fetch method on it, right? And that will return to you an attachment with a bunch of data. It's sad, I can't bump my browser size to make things work well enough to show you, I don't think. Let's see. Check that out. So we can do WP media attachment. Actually, let's just query. Let's query all recent attachments. WP media query. If you want all recent attachments, you don't have to pass in an object. Let's fetch them. just do query get more if they exist. And now we see that there are 80 attachments. I've got some by default. And there are a whole bunch of attachment objects in here. And so we get the first one. This is the first attachment. So the query is a collection of attachments. And it's just this attachments collection, like we talked about in Backbone. That is down here. And this has a bunch of magic to make sure that if you change one of the query properties, it will update the attachments accordingly. If you change the search parameter, it'll update the attachments accordingly. And it also will make sure that they stay cached, so you're all dealing with the same data. So over here, if I take a look at the first attachment, which is just one item, I can say to JSON to look at its properties in a nicer format. And you can see that it's returned us an attachment with a lot of relevant data. So if you ever had to write a plugin for old media, you were probably parsing HTML and working with weird object structures. And it was really not a fun time. This is built so that you have access to the raw data structures so that when you get an attachment, it gives you everything important about that attachment. Everything from authors and file names to sizes, to what type it is, to where it was uploaded. All this stuff is there. Hey. Yeah, so this is, right now, the question is where is it running? Is it running on client side or server side? This is running in my browser's console, so this is client side. And what the attachments have hooked up to it is it will automatically do an AJAX request if you request more attachments, right? So you can either say create a group of attachments with these specific attachments, or we have a way of saying query the database for attachments that match this. And it will return 40 attachments at a time if you don't change the defaults. So these are the first 80 attachments in my library. In this case, the ID of my attachment is 1542. So I could get this same attachment. And I should probably actually make a better shortcut to this by saying wp.media attachment.get. Was it 1542? Whoop. It should be there. Model. WP media model attachment get 1542. That will return the same object, right? And it's literally the same one. It's not a different copy. So if I change one, the other changes. And I can do the same thing to JSON to get that same information. You can watch it for changes. You can put it in different collections. We can create queries. So we can query for all the audio files. And the queries we have a shortcut for. So it's just WP media query. And you pass it an object of properties that you want your attachment to have. And we automatically translate those properties into a query for attachments on the WordPress database, right? So I can say I want all attachments with type audio, of which I think actually I have none now. So this should return nothing. So I can say var audio equals this. I can say audio.more to fetch more attachments. And then if I want to see how many I have, I can say audio.length. And there are none, because there are none in my database. But if I want to get just images, I can say type image. And then I can hit enter, grab some more. Now there are a whole bunch, right? And so this is kind of the underpinnings of all of the data. And we can change this. So I think that the data set in here, because I just uploaded pretty much one big gallery to show you guys, isn't that great. But if I wanted to change what this searched for, this has a props art object where, let's see what it is. It has a props model that's stuck to the collection. And so this is the information about that query, right? It's going to order them by date. It is a query, and it's looking for images, right? And I can, since it's a model, I can set something. So I can say set search to, you know, not here, because I don't have any attachments that will match this. hit enter. And if this worked, now the length is nothing, right? Because we set this search term and everything in there didn't match. And so this is still a query, so we can say, all right, we'll see if anything did match. Still nothing. Or we can turn it back, so we can say unset search. We're back to 80 attachments, right? And so this is just saying, how can you access this data and manipulate it well in JavaScript and build a dynamic application with this data without having to deal with all the AJAX requests on your own, without having to juggle all of these server-side things on your own. That's what this is here for. And when it comes down to it, hopefully we will start building more and more of these APIs so that on the front end you can start building dynamic applications, because that's the goal. And that is kind of the power of JavaScript and where we can go. And we're trying to move forward. We're trying to be, allow for applications beyond just simple themes, right? Because they exist, but a lot of the time you have to struggle with every single aspect of the thing. You have to know PHP really well. You have to do all of these different things. And at this stage, WordPress is really a platform and can support these level of applications, right? The Media Manager is just an application. This could have been done in a plugin. This could be done in anything totally custom. And the whole point is that we should give you tools to do this better. So in the generation of this, actually, me and the other, one of the other lead developers, Andrew Nason, went to the New York Times to meet with them about their media setup. And their blogs team uses WordPress, and they have a bunch of other proprietary CMS stuff that it's bridged with. And they said, here's our media solution, right? We had to ditch everything in WordPress and write our own custom thing because this didn't support our needs and we didn't want to deal with parsing HTML. And the conversation we had was basically, whatever we create, it should work for the most basic situation, the most basic bloggers, but it should be easier for you guys to leverage what we've already built and build something on top of it and build something great that then you can give back and use to make our stuff better and your stuff better and save everyone time than it should be to create your own thing, right? And so that's one of my goals here, is that if you want to create some sort of crazy media application, this should be able to support that. And if it doesn't, let me know. So yeah, that's the basics of the models. And the views are a little more complicated, if only because they're for specific purposes, right? And so I will talk about them more in theory than in practice because this file is very long. So when I close this and I open up the media library, you can see that it's divided mostly into sections, right? We have this kind of menu, we have a toolbar, we have a content area, we have a sidebar. All of these different areas can be controlled individually, and so it makes it easy to switch between these different states. Also, the data associated with each state changes a bit, but you don't want to be juggling global state all the time. One of the tricky parts here is that for people that are used to more Backbone type of stuff, you usually have an application or some root object. We can't have that here, because the thing is that we can have several instances of the Media Manager in a single page. So I can close this, because this was we were inserting into the post. If I want to go down and choose a featured image, it's going to take me to a different scenario and remember exactly where I am. So I can scroll this down to the bottom and highlight this picture. I can scroll up, and this is going to remember my selection from inserting into the post. It's going to remember my scroll position from there. It will remember if I'm on the embed page, because these are two different things that they need to coexist, and they need to be able to live together, and you need to be able to customize them to individual workflows. And so in this case, we don't have a sidebar. We just have a big content area, has its own toolbar, same menu. When we create a gallery, the menu changes, and we use the similar type of content area, but a different source for the library, a different source for the thing, a different type of display where we show drag and drop to reorder images instead of search. All of these things are customizable, And all of these things can be used to create your own variants. Yes?
Side note, when you're switching between upload images and media gallery, does that now occur without a page refresh?
Yeah, all of this occurs without a page refresh. That's what makes this so hard. So the question was, am I switching between upload new images and gallery without a page refresh? The answer is yes. And that's the whole point, is that every single bit of this is done without a page refresh. And so when I was ranting about memory management earlier, that's why. You're living in one page, and you're doing all this stuff in one page, which makes it super dynamic, really fast, and really powerful. But at the same time, it comes with its own drawbacks, and you have to be careful about how you do it. And we're trying to give you the tools to be able to do that. There was a question up here. Yeah.
So, I can get images and I can get audio, and I know you're a media guy, but can I use the same API to get posts and pages?
So the question is, I can get images and audio. Can I get posts and pages? And right now, the answer is no. So what it is that right now we have these representations of attachments. And when we take a look at, say, where's this model, right? When we look at this model, a lot of this stuff is media specific, right? You see file name, you see caption, you see alt text. We don't have a generic representation for posts yet. And so this is something that I'd like to see in the future. But part of it is that we just added underscore and Backbone in this version. And this is an experiment, right? Hopefully it will work out. Hopefully people will be building awesome things, but this is still an experiment. And so hopefully the community will start to pick up on it. We'll see what works. We'll see what doesn't. We'll see how we can change APIs. And the result should hopefully be some really mind-blowing applications. Before I take more questions, I'm just going to say I think that this is about it. So that's media. That's how it works. That's 3.5. Get excited. Hopefully we will be releasing on December 5th. And if we're not, I will be very sad. We're working really, really hard to make that happen. So please test your sites. If you're a plugin author, if you're a theme author, just install a test blog and see how things work out. See how they roll. Make sure nothing breaks. If you happen to be the author of a media plugin, your plugin will probably work because we've worked for backwards compatibility to just absolutely any new tabs, any custom fields. They should sync. They should work. But if they don't, you should let us know. So with that, thank you guys. Any questions?
Really quick interstitial. Short survey. Who found that useful? Okay. Who thought it was too complicated? And please don't be hesitant to say it. It's really complicated stuff. Okay. We're experimenting with some ideas for this meetup. We're trying to make it a really good place to learn about advanced topics. We're still trying some different stuff. We tried a workshop idea today. We tried a this is very, very advanced stuff. So we're going to collect feedback on some other ways as well, but I just want a quick overview. I hope you learned something. I hope more than that, you have something that you still want to learn. That was really my goal. Hopefully it was his. Please ask questions. There's some more beer that's cold. I'm going to bring some more out in a little while. But I don't want to stop the questions. Hopefully there's some stuff you want to talk about. So go for it. If you want to get a drink, please try to be respectful and quiet and maybe walk around that way and don't make too much noise. But feel free to.
Evan.
Feel free to stick around. Listen to the questions.
What?
Drink?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and this is really cool stuff, so you should ask questions.
Is there any change to the way video is being handled?
The question is there any change to the way video is being handled? The answer is right now, no. But one of the things I would really like to see, especially in 3.6 and probably through a plugin first, is ways of handling audio.
Please try to be quiet. I know it's hard, but it's very useful.
Way of handling audio and video in the post. So what I would really love to see is right now we just display things as an icon. It would be really cool if in that list table you would be able to see the audio file and play it right there, or see a screen cap of the video and be able to play the video right there. I think that would be great, and I think that's really one of our next steps.
Allow embed codes in the visual editor, because I know I have clients that are really unmedia savvy that I have to teach them how to go into the HTML and add an embed code in there. Even just to be able to add it
So one of the next question was adding embed codes. Not really a question, but I like to add embed codes to the editor. Can we do that? The answer is that's something that I'm really, really excited to get started on. It will require a bunch of work in TinyMCE. We started that this version and then ended up kind of backing it out just to make sure that it's stable and works well, because that's hard to do. But hopefully we will have things like paste YouTube link and YouTube video happens. Next question right there. Did we have to drop any browser support to accomplish this? The answer is no. We are supporting IE7 and up. IE7 is still a little broken. We're trying to get it in line, and it is a progressive enhancement experience. So a lot of the styles, a lot of the display might not be as good, but it's there. I can't say I love supporting it, but we do. And until there will come a point, probably soon, that we'll drop IE7. We'll probably have to hold off on IE8 for a while, just because Windows XP end of life is 2014, which kind of sucks. Yes. The question is, how do you choose between using Backbone views and underscore templates? And the answer is yes. You use both. And so behind the scenes in our views, the views are using templates, and we have a special function called WP Media Template designed to fetch a template from the DOM, and it's formatted in our specific way in our syntax. So in that case, the template looks something, let's see, I can find a good one for you. The template looks something like this, where if you want to interpolate some data, you put that right here. If you want to run some JavaScript, you put that right here. And that's all encapsulated in a script tag that has an ID, and it fetches by that ID and compiles down. It begins with TMPL. So what that results in is a view that looks something like this, where you see that it has a template associated with it by default. And this will lazily automatically compile that template. And then when we're actually running it, where's a good example? Usually the easiest way of running a template is that in your render method, you're just running a line like this, which is this.element set the HTML to the template when run with the options that are currently there. So that's how they work together, is that you use that really for just creating that HTML at the last second. But the view is the thing that manages all the events, manages all the bindings, manages how it attaches to the model, the collection, all things like that. More questions back there? No, that's you.
I was curious, what was that visual experience presentation?
My presentation is cobbled together out of a bunch of different things. It's Deck.js, and the visual editor is CodeMirror with just a bunch of custom CSS and styles. What's that? What, like in my presentation? That's CodeMirror. CodeMirror. It's a really awesome in-browser editor. I definitely recommend it. Give it a try.
Can you make this presentation available after?
I can probably make both available. Part of what's with this is that you see I'm kind of editing so quickly that a lot of this is really more about the resources. I would really recommend looking at the Underscore documentation site, the Backbone documentation site, and the WordPress source, because that's going to be the most valuable thing at the end of the day. Yeah, I think let's mingle. If you have more questions, just come up and ask me afterwards. Thank you, guys.